In this video, I'm going to be talking about CHINS cases in Indiana and what to do if DCS is investigating your family. If this has happened to you, you may be wondering what you should do or not do when this happens. Should you talk to DCS? Should you take the drug test? Questions like that. We're going to walk you through that in this video, as well as give you an understanding of the Indiana CHINS process, shedding light on the laws, as well as steps you can take if you're involved in this kind of case. But before we do that, let me introduce myself. My name's Nathan Vining. I'm a criminal defense and family law attorney here in Indiana, and I represent individuals in cases throughout Indiana. By the end of this video, you should understand the CHINS court process as well as the common issues that arise in CHINS cases and what you can do to resolve them. So to start, we're going to talk about how you navigate a CHINS case and what to do when DCS is investigating your family. First, it's crucial to know that anyone can report suspected child abuse or neglect to the Department of Child Services. Even if the allegations are false, the consequences can be severe, potentially leading to child removal. If a report's made, DCS will investigate the allegations and it may initiate a CHINS case. So what is CHINS? CHINS means Child in Need of Services, and it means that there's something that triggered the state to investigate. And essentially they're seeing, does the state need to be involved in your family to ensure child safety? And if so, what services need to be provided to the family to ensure that safety? So here on this slide, you see some of the reasons that DCS may intervene. For instance, child neglect, if there's unsuitable living conditions in the home, lack of power, lack of heat, lack of food, things like that. Substance abuse, if a child's born with substances in the child's system or the mother has drugs in her system at the time the child's born, or if DCS happens to take a drug screen and there's a positive drug screen at some point in the case, substance abuse could be a reason for a CHINS case. Another thing you see often is domestic violence. If police are called to your home for domestic violence and the children are present, a CHINS case may be open, as well as just any situation that physically endangers the child. These are the kinds of things that would open up a CHINS case, which again, CHINS means Child in Need of Services, and this is where the state would intervene, investigate your family, and determine if the state needs to provide some level of oversight over the family. And when DCS does this, their goal is to make sure there's no issues in the future. The second thing you should know about CHINS cases is that DCS can remove your children from your care, which is why it's important to get legal help immediately when DCS shows up at your door and starts investigating. Here we show a couple things. First, the statutory requirement for removal is that children can be removed if their physical or mental health will be seriously endangered without the removal. It's important to know that the removal can happen prior to court hearings, so sometimes the DCS may come and take your children before you even go to court. And it's important to know that you have a right to a hearing within 2 business days after removal. So if DCS shows up, they have concerns, and they remove your children, you have a right to a hearing within 2 days, and you're going to want to lawyer up quickly and have counsel present for that hearing. It's also important to know if you can't afford an attorney, counsel is oftentimes appointed for people in these kinds of hearings, so you would have a right to an attorney in this kind of proceeding. It's important to know, though, there's 2 big things you should do if your children are removed. First is, at that hearing, argue for your children to be returned home. You may have an idea on why DCS came, and you may be able to present some evidence to show that the concerns are unfounded and that the children should be returned home immediately. The other thing you should do, and you can start doing this prior to the hearing even, is to argue for family placement. Sometimes DCS goes and removes the children and they get the children in family placement right away. Other times they may need to do background checks and to investigate who the family they're going to be placing the child with is. So you're going to want to provide the case manager with contact information for family who you want the child placed with, so they can get that investigation going, so they're not having an extended stay in foster care or with somebody that you don't know. So ultimately what you're going to want to do is argue for family placement. Another thing I tell people in a CHINS case is that this is a kind of situation where DCS may not know you or your family yet. So sometimes you need to work with them a little to show them who you are, that there's no issues or causes for concern in your family. So it's kind of a balance between asserting your rights as well as kind of befriending the enemy here and letting them get to know you, treating them with respect, and working and cooperating with the investigation. But you need an attorney who can help you determine what things you should cooperate with and what things you shouldn't cooperate with, because there's a lot of strategy involved in a CHINS case. The other thing we're going to talk about is the CHINS court process. Here, there's a lot of steps to it. What we've talked about so far is the investigation. Ultimately, someone may call and indicate that there's some kind of concern about your family. It could be a teacher, a therapist, a coach, an ex in a custody case. Ultimately, it can be anyone, and you have no right to know who is the person that actually called. But ultimately, DCS shows up to your door. They do an investigation. One of two things will typically happen here is either, or I guess three things. Either they'll find there's no concern. Sometimes they may see that there are some concerns, and they'll file what's known as an informal adjustment. And what they'll do is make an agreement with you and your family to do certain things. Sometimes they would maybe create a safety plan. For instance, maybe the child got out of the house and somebody found a child. They'll create a safety plan to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. Ultimately, it's just an agreement that you will uphold certain obligations to DCS. They'll check in with you from time to time to make sure that's happening. And if you do that, the case would essentially go away. Other times, though, they may determine that the case needs a formal process, and that's where they would file a CHINS petition, and that starts the CHINS process. And ultimately, that would take you to the next steps of this process, which ultimately would be removal of the children. Sometimes in a CHINS case, the children are removed. Other times, there is an in-home CHINS and the children are actually never removed. It's just a little more formal process than an informal adjustment. And there would be obligations to the court to do certain things to ultimately close the case. The next thing would be if the children are removed, there's a removal hearing. And then ultimately, this is a case that's built around allegations. It's a little different than a traditional family law case, but it's not like a criminal case. Ultimately, what's happening in a CHINS case is that the state's alleging that something happened that caused the state concern. It could be child neglect, it could be substance abuse issues. And for the state to continue the CHINS process and actually have a CHINS case opened up against you, they're going to have to ultimately prove certain things happened. And that would happen at what's known as the fact-finding hearing. And it's important to know that you have a right to a trial, which is known as the fact-finding hearing, within 60 days. So this fact-finding is where the state would have to present evidence to show that there was a real need for them to intervene, such as the child neglect, domestic violence, or substance abuse issues. And it's important to know that worst case, you have a right to that trial within 60 days unless DCS can show some good cause, or you agree that there's some good cause for it to happen later. And then ultimately, at a fact-finding, DCS would show that there is concern, and they would prove that the child is a child in need of services, or you would win, and DCS would not be able to prove the child's a child in need of services. If DCS is successful in showing there's a CHINS, it would go to a dispositional hearing, and then ultimately what happens there is DCS would order certain services that need to be in place. They would give you a roadmap of what they want to see you do in order to get the case closed. But it's important to know that ultimately, out of all these steps from investigation to fact-finding to disposition, you can negotiate with DCS. So a lot of times after removal of the child and before fact-finding, you would have a mediation or settlement conference with DCS and talk about what you can do to ease their concerns, get the children back with you, and work to close out the case. So also, if their children are found CHINS, ultimately there will be periodic review hearings to keep the case progressing, to make sure if there's services that have been ordered that you're actually in fact getting them, and the court will check in periodically. So that's why there's the review hearings there. But ultimately, that's just a brief overview of the CHINS process. We're going to talk a little bit more next about what you can do if you find yourself in this process. So there's a few common issues that as an attorney I see in CHINS cases, and they can happen at all different points in the case, but one of the biggest is just wrong information. Sometimes there's false reports, or there was an incomplete investigation and DCS is just working on wrong information. So as an attorney, I would basically work with my client to pull positive evidence forward to show, hey, you maybe got this wrong. There may be incomplete drug test information. There could be medical records that show something different, or you may have things like employment drug screens that show that there's no sobriety issues on your end. Another thing that you may run into is just lack of responsiveness. DCS sometimes may be busy. There may be a case manager that's on vacation. Who knows, but maybe DCS isn't answering your calls or providing answers. A lot of times an attorney can help with that lack of responsiveness and actually get to an attorney or somebody else in the office and just talk to somebody at a higher level to get answers and drive the case forward. A lot of times too, when I'm hired in a case, there's immediate placement issues. DCS may have placed a child in foster care instead of with family, so we would need to file motions to correct that quickly. So there's commonly placement issues. And then the last thing, we haven't talked about this yet, but there's service issues. So at its core, this case ultimately means that DCS had concerns about something going on in your home or with your child. And what they do is they would provide services to the family. What that means is they may require that you do random drug testing. They may require some kind of behavior modification courses, such as a substance abuse treatment, anger management, domestic violence classes. They also oftentimes have some kind of therapeutic component. So there'd be home-based therapy, sometimes in-office therapy. So there could be issues with services. So if DCS ultimately removes your child, one of the first things you want to do is ask, well, what do you want to see me do to get the child back? And that's what services does DCS want you to do. So your attorney can work out what services are appropriate so you're not doing unreasonable things, but you're going to want to be working on these services. So if your child's removed and there's a substance abuse issue, you're going to want to immediately get into treatment. You're going to want random drug testing, and you're going to want to do that as soon as possible rather than at the 60-day mark, so you're moving faster to getting your child back. So a lot of times an issue that could occur is that maybe a service has been identified that you need to do, but it's taking a while to get it started. An attorney can help work through those service issues so you can start working on the things you need to be working on faster. So what can you do if you find yourself in a DCS case? And there's actually a lot. This is the kind of case where the more work you do, the more it helps you. So first, as soon as DCS up and they leave, you should keep a detailed journal and document everything. You want to have a good timeline in terms of DCS told me on this day that I needed to do X service, and so then maybe it took them 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get that service going. So you're going to want to document who you've talked to, what services have been complete. Because another thing that happens is these cases are like almost like a game of telephone where there's too many. Another thing that can commonly happen is that these cases are kind of like a game of telephone where there's a lot of information transferred from person to person and things get lost. So sometimes they may say that, hey, this person's not doing the drug test, but in fact you did. So you want to document everything. Another big thing you're going to want to do is get copies of all the records in your case. These things are confidential, which is a good thing. But when somebody comes to hire me as an attorney, I can't go online and get access to the CHINS petition or things like that. So you're going to want to make sure you get copies of things like the CHINS petition, court orders. So that way, if you hire counsel or you go to talk to your attorney, you have all that stuff ready and you know exactly what's going on in your case. Another important thing to do is to stay calm when dealing with DCS. I understand it can be frustrating. These people removed your child, sometimes unjustly, but it's also one of those things you want to befriend your enemy here, because they're going to be the person that's working with you, placing your child back with you. So you're going to want to stay calm, work with them. And then, they also do provide good services to families and families that really need their help sometimes. So you want to work with them and stay calm as best as you can, because being hostile just isn't going to help move things forward. And it's hard, but that's ultimately the truth. Sometimes you need to hire an attorney and let your attorney do the fighting in court with their attorney, and not take it out on staff members. Another big thing to do is get the contact information for all the people in your case. Know who the people are: the child advocate, the DCS attorney, the case manager, the service providers. This is another big thing. Again, it's not public information, so you when you hire somebody or you talk to your attorney, you're going to want to know who these people are and how you can contact them. And then last, if your child has been removed, you're going to want to provide names for family placements to the case manager immediately. You're also going to want to, when you go to court, ask the judge for as much parenting time as possible. And then ask what services DCS wants you to complete, and talk with your attorney about whether you should start doing them before there's a CHINS finding or not, because sometimes working on those services early helps get you the return of your children faster. So there's a lot of strategy in all these cases. They're pretty highly nuanced. So you're going to want to get advice if you find yourself in this situation. And then how can an attorney help? We've talked a lot about this, but when we looked at that process, every step of the way we can negotiate with DCS. We can kind of get to a higher level and talk with the attorneys and get information faster. I can help with removal issues, file motions to get placement hearings or even additional placement hearings. We can argue to get more parenting time, worked out parenting time issues. We can hold DCS accountable in terms of, was there actually a reason for DCS to be involved, and is there an actual CHINS child? Is your child actually a child in need of services? So we can hold them accountable there, and we can protect your rights. There's a lot of rights because parenting your child is ultimately a very fundamental right under the Constitution. So you have a lot of protections in place, and there are certain deadlines that need to be met and requirements made before a child can be removed and DCS can intervene in your family. So we can help protect your rights, and then we can ultimately help you navigate the process. Like I said, we can help get services in place and work through all these different things. So ultimately, if you find yourself in a CHINS case and you need help, I'm happy to answer questions. So call or text today. We can talk about what's been going on, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about the CHINS process, and maybe some tips about what you can do if you find DCS at your door looking into your family. And one of the most important things to do is to get help quickly, because you want to know when you should cooperate and when you should not cooperate and what you should be doing in this situation. So thanks for watching. Again, call or text, message me on my website. Thank you.